"You came alone?" they mocked. Mafia boss appeared behind her. "Not anymore. She's with me." The rain in Greycrest did not wash the city clean. It only seemed to slick the grime deeper into the pavement, turning the neon lights of the downtown district into blurry, weeping streaks of red and blue. Ava Moreno watched the downpour through the plate glass window of the diner. Her reflection, a pale ghost against the dark street outsit. At 25 years old, she felt closer to 50. Her feet throbbed in her non-slip shoes, a dull, rhythmic ache that had become the background music of her life. It was 2 a.m. The diner was empty, save for a trucker nursing a black coffee and the hum of the refrigerator unit behind the counter. Ava wiped down the Formica surface for the 3rd time, her movements mechanical. She still had 3 hours of this shift left, followed by a 40-minute bus ride to the small, cramping apartment she shared with her mother and younger brother. Once she got there, she would not sleep. She had a remote data entry gig that needed to be filed by noon, and her mother needed her medication sorted and her blood pressure checked. Survival in Greycrest was not a sprint. It was a marathon run underwater. Ava finished wiping the counter and tossed the rag into the sanitizer bucket. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, but she ignored it. If it was an emergency, they would call. If it was a bill collector, she could not pay them until Friday anyway. She checked the clock. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. By the time she finally unlocked the front door of their apartment building, just as the sun was threatening to breach the gray horizon, her body felt heavy, as if her bones were made of lead. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs, the scent of boiled cabbage and old carpet greeting her. Inside. The apartment was quiet. The rhythmic hiss of her mother's oxygen concentrator was the only sound. Ava tiptoed past her mother's room, pausing just long enough to see the rise and fall of the quilt. Her mother, Maria, had been battling heart failure for 2 years. Every breath she took was a victory Ava fought to pay for. Ava moved to the small living room where her brother, Diego, usually slept on the pull-out couch. The couch was empty. The blankets were tangled, suggesting a restless night. But Diego was gone. He was 19, old enough to make his own choices, but young enough to make terrible ones. On the cushion, his phone sat face down. It buzzed again, vibrating against the fabric. Ava frowned. Diego never went anywhere without his phone. It was practically glued to his hand. She picked it up, intending to put it on the kitchen table, but the screen lit up with a notification that made her blood run cold. "You have 24 hours, kid. Don't make us come to the house." Ava stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She knew the passcode. Diego used his birthday for everything. She swiped it open. The text thread was a long, spiraling descent into hell. It started with bravado, Diego bragging about a sure thing at a poker table. Then came the losses, then the desperation, and finally, the threats. "Northside Blades, you owe $15,000. Victor wants his money, Diego. I can get it. Just give me a week. Northside Blades, you have 24 hours. Or we take it out on your family. Maybe that sister of yours has some value." The phone slipped from Ava's fingers and landed on the carpet with a dull thud. The room suddenly felt very small, the air too thin to breathe. $15,000. It might as well have been $15 million. They barely had enough for rent and the next round of her mother's heart medication. The front door clicked open. Diego slipped inside, looking pale and shaking, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat and rain. He froze when he saw Ava standing there, his phone lying at her feet. He did not say anything. He just slumped against the doorframe, the fight draining out of him. "Tell me it is not true," Ava whispered, her voice trembling. "Tell me you did not borrow money from the Northside Blades." Diego slid down the doorframe until he was sitting on the floor, burying his face in his hands. "I thought I could double it. Ava, it was a quick win. Everyone said it was easy money. I wanted to help with Mom's surgery bills. I just wanted to help." "By gambling with gangsters?" Ava's voice rose, cracking with a mix of fury and terror. She dropped to her knees in front of him, grabbing his shoulders. "Do you know who Victor Hale is? Do you know what they do to people?" "I know," Diego sobbed, looking up at her with terrified eyes. "They told me if I don't pay by tonight, they are coming here. They mentioned you. Ava, they know where we live." Ava felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. The Northside Blades were not just a gang. They were a pack of wolves that owned the industrial district. They dealt in extortion, drugs, and violence that the police conveniently ignored. 24 hours, Ava repeated, her mind racing. "We have 24 hours. She stood up. Pacing the small room, she had to fix this. That was who she was. She was the fixer. She was the one who handled the eviction notices, the medical forms, the empty fridge. She could not let her brother be hurt. She could not let them come near her mother. "Stay here," she ordered Diego, her voice hardening. "Do not leave this apartment. Do not open the door for anyone but me." "Where are you going?" Diego asked, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "To find money," she said. But Graycrest was not a city that gave money to people like Ava Moreno. 3 hours later, Ava sat in a rigid chair at the local bank branch. The loan officer, a man with a perfectly knotted tie and eyes that looked like dull coins, pushed a paper across the desk. "I'm sorry, Miss Moreno," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Your debt-to-income ratio is already too high. With the existing medical loans and your mother's lack of income, we cannot approve a personal loan of $15,000. You are a liability risk." "It is an emergency," Ava pleaded, gripping the edge of the desk until her knuckles turned white. "I work 2 jobs. I can pick up a third. I will pay every cent back." "The computer says no," he said simply, closing the folder. "Have a nice day." Ava walked out of the bank, the sunlight feeling harsh and mocking. She took the bus to the logistics firm where she did data entry. Her supervisor, a woman named Brenda, who drank energy drinks like water, barely looked up from her monitors when Ava asked for an advance. "Policy says no advances until you have been here a year," Brenda said, typing furiously. "You've been here 6 months. Ask me in December." "Please," Ava said, her voice tight. "It is life or death." Brenda finally looked up, her expression flat. "It is always life or death, Ava. That is what being poor is. Get back to work or clock out." Ava clocked out. She stood on the sidewalk outside the office building. The city roared around her, cars honking, sirens wailing in the distance, the relentless churn of commerce and crime. She checked her watch. 7 hours left. She had exactly $412 in her checking account. She looked at her reflection in a shop window. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes, and her brown hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She wore cheap trousers and a worn cardigan. She looked exactly like what she was, exhausted, desperate, and invisible. But she was not helpless. She took out her phone and opened the text thread she had forwarded from Diego's phone to her own. There was an address sent in the last message. The Velvet Trap. Old Industrial Park. Come alone with the cash. She knew the place. It was an abandoned nightclub on the edge of the city, in the territory where the streetlights were broken and the police patrols were rare. Diego had texted her a dozen times. "Ava, don't do anything crazy. Ava, please answer." She typed back a single message. "I am handling it." Then she turned off her phone. She went home only to change. She put on her best black slacks and a crisp white button-down shirt, her professional clothes. She wanted to look like she meant business, like a woman who balanced ledgers, not a victim. She pulled her hair into a tight, severe ponytail. "Ava?" her mother called out from the bedroom as Ava passed the door. "Go back to sleep, Mama," Ava called back, forcing her voice to be steady and light. "Just going to pick up an extra shift. I will see you in the morning." She lied with the ease of someone who had been protecting her family from harsh truths for a decade. The bus ride to the industrial district took an hour. The passengers thinned out until Ava was the only one left. The driver gave her a pitying look when she got off at the last stop, the air thick with the smell of salt water and rusting metal. She walked 4 blocks through the shadowing dusk. The buildings here were skeletons of industry, shattered windows, graffiti tags marking territory. weeds cracking through the concrete. The velvet trap stood at the end of a cul-de-sac. The neon sign was long dead, the pink paint peeling to reveal gray metal underneath. A massive bouncer stood by the rusted metal door, his arms crossed over a chest the size of a beer keg. Ava walked up to him. She kept her chin high. "I am here to see Victor Hale," she said. The bouncer looked her up and down, a sneer curling his lip. "Victor does not have appointments with school teachers. I am here about Diego Moreno's debt," she said clearly. "Let me in." The bouncer laughed, a wet, gritty sound. He tapped his earpiece, muttered something, and then stepped aside. "Go on back. End of the hall." Ava stepped into the darkness. The inside of the club smelled of mildew, stale beer, and something metallic, like old blood. The main floor was empty, chairs stacked on tables covered in dust sheets. The only light came from the back, a yellow, sickly glow spilling from an open office door. Ava walked toward it. Her heels clicked on the sticky floor, the sound echoing too loudly in the silence. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, but she forced her hands to hang loose at her sides. She would not show fear. Fear was blood in the water. She stepped into the back room. The air was thick with cigarette smoke. 4 men sat around a poker table, their faces illuminated by a single hanging bulb. In the corner, counting a stack of cash, sat Victor Hale. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 30, with bleached blonde hair buzzed short and a scar running through his eyebrow. He wore a leather jacket that cost more than Ava's entire life, and his eyes were sharp, blue and cruel. When Ava entered, the conversation stopped. All eyes turned to her. "Well," Victor said, leaning back in his chair and grinning, "Diego sent his sister. I thought he was joking." "He did not send me," Ava said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her knees. "I came myself." One of the men at the table snickered. "She looks like a librarian boss." Victor stood up. He was tall, wiry, and moved with the coiled energy of a snake. He walked around the table, stopping just inches from Ava. She could smell his cologne, expensive, musky, and overpowering. "Where is the money, sweetheart?" Victor asked, looking past her toward the door. "I do not have the 15,000, Ava said. The room went deadly silent. Victor's smile didn't fade, but it stopped reaching his eyes. "Then why are you here?" he asked softly. "Are you lost?" "I am here to negotiate," Ava said. She took a breath, reciting the pitch she had rehearsed on the bus. "My brother is 19. He made a mistake. We do not have $15,000, and killing him will not get you paid. But I have skills. I'm a bookkeeper. I manage data. I know you run businesses that need clean ledgers. I can work off the debt. I will work for you for free until it is paid." She held his gaze, willing him to see her value, to see her as an asset rather than a victim. Victor stared at her for a long second, then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, barking sound that signaled to his men that they should laugh too. "You want to be my accountant?" Victor wheezed, wiping his eye. "You think the Northside Blades need a bookkeeper? We have people for that, people who do not look like they are about to faint." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her jawline. His skin was rough, his touch possessive. Ava flinched but stood her ground. "You have pretty skin," Victor murmured, his voice dropping to a slur. "Soft. You look soft. Ava. Is that your name?" "Don't touch me," Ava said, her voice hardening. "You walked into my house, empty-handed," Victor said, his fingers sliding down to her neck. "You owe me 15 grand. If you can't pay with cash, maybe we keep you here until you work it off in other ways." The men at the table jeered, their eyes raking over her. Ava's stomach twisted violently. She felt a surge of bile rise in her throat. This was not a negotiation. This was a trap. "I will go to the police," Ava bluffed, though she knew it was useless. Victor laughed again, harder this time. He grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising. "The police! Honey, the police do not come down here. You belong to me now." He shoved her backward. Ava stumbled, her legs hitting a wooden chair. She collapsed into it, the breath knocked out of her. Victor loomed over her, bracing his hands on the arms of the chair, trapping her. "Look at you," Victor mocked, his face inches from hers. Trembling like a leaf. "You really thought you could walk in here and talk business? You are nothing." One of the thugs behind him stood up, cracking his knuckles. "You came alone?" the man taunted, shaking his head with a cruel smirk. "Stupid girl, no one is coming for you." Ava squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back the tears of humiliation and terror. She was alone. She'd always been alone. Not anymore. A deep voice rumbled from the shadows of the hallway. "She is with me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Victor froze. The smirk vanished from his face as if it had been slapped off. He straightened up slowly, turning toward the door. The men at the table scrambled to their feet, their hands drifting toward their waistbands, but they stopped dead when they saw who was standing there. Luca Voss stepped into the light. He was a man who seemed to absorb the shadows around him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that was tailored to perfection. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that was devastatingly handsome and utterly terrifying. His eyes were the color of cold steel, and they were fixed on Victor with an intensity that promised violence. Behind him stood 2 massive bodyguards, silent and lethal, their presence filling the doorway. But no one was looking at them. Everyone was looking at Luca. He was the ghost story criminals told each other in the dark. The head of the Voss syndicate, the man who truly ran Greycrest. Ava stared up at him, her breath caught in her throat. She had seen his picture in the newspapers, usually accompanying articles about alleged organized crime connections or high-profile charity galas. In person, he was overwhelming. Luca walked into the room. He moved with a predatory grace, making no sound. He stopped a few feet from where Ava sat, but he did not look at her yet. He kept his eyes on Victor. "Voss," Victor stammered, his voice losing all its oily confidence. I did not know you were coming. We were just handling some local business, a debt collection." "I see that," Luca said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth as velvet but heavy as a tombstone. "But you seem to be confused about jurisdiction. Victor?" "Jurisdiction?" Victor asked, sweating now. "This is Northside. This is our territory." "The girl," Luca said, finally glancing down at Ava. His gaze was heavy, sweeping over her terrified face, her gripping hands, the way she shrank back into the chair. For a second, something flickered in his eyes, not pity, but recognition. Anger. He looked back at Victor. "The girl is with me." The silence that followed was deafening. Ava's mind reeled. She had never met this man in her life. She was a waitress and a data clerk. Why was the most dangerous man in the city claiming her? Victor looked between Luca and Ava, trying to process the lie. She's a nobody. Her brother owes me money, small-time stuff. Why would the Voss syndicate care about a waitress? "Do not ask me questions," Luca said softly. He took a step forward, and Victor instinctively took a step back. "I'm telling you that her debt is canceled, and if you ever touch her, look at her, or speak her name again, I will burn this sad little club to the ground with you inside it." Luca extended a hand toward Ava. It was large, his palm open. He did not grab her. He waited. "Get up, Ava," he said. He knew her name. Ava looked at his hand, then at his face. It was hard, unyielding, but in the chaos of the room, he was the only stable thing. She reached out. His fingers closed around hers. His grip was warm, firm, and shockingly strong. He pulled her to her feet effortlessly, drawing her away from the chair, away from Victor, until she was standing just behind his shoulder. He positioned himself between her and the blades, a human shield in a $3,000 suit. "We are leaving," Luca announced to the room. "Mr. Voss," Victor called out, desperation creeping into his tone. "The money. It is 15 grand. I have to answer to my bosses, too." Luca stopped at the doorway. He did not turn around. "Send the bill to my office," Luca said dismissively. "And Victor? Consider this your only warning. Next time, I won't be polite." Luca guided Ava out of the room, his hand resting lightly but possessively on the small of her back. As they walked away from the smoke and the fear, leaving the stunned men behind them, Ava realized with a jolt that she had walked into the lion's den to save herself, only to be dragged out by the dragon. And as terrifying as the blades were, the heat radiating from the man beside her felt infinitely more dangerous. The hallway leading out of the back room felt miles long, the air thick with the lingering scent of stale tobacco and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. Luca Voss did not look back. He kept his hand firmly placed on the small of Ava's back, a point of contact that felt scorching through the thin fabric of her white button-down shirt. It was not a gentle touch, nor was it rough. It was a shackle, a physical anchor binding her to his side as they navigated the gloom of the nightclub. Behind them, the silence in the office had broken, replaced by the hushed, frantic murmuring of Victor Hale and his crew. But no one followed. They knew better. When they pushed through the rusted metal doors and stepped out into the night, the cool air hit Ava like a slap. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, misting the asphalt of the industrial cul-de-sac. 2 black SUVs idled near the entrance, their engines purring with a low, predatory rumble. The moment the heavy door clanged shut behind them, severing the connection to the nightmare inside, the adrenaline that had been holding Ava upright suddenly curdled into fury. She wrenched herself away from Luca, stumbling a few steps on the uneven pavement before spinning around to face him. "What was that?" she demanded, her voice shaking violently. You just bought me? Like I am a used car?" Luca stopped near the rear door of the first sedan. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable in the shadows cast by the street lamp. The drizzle settled on the shoulders of his charcoal suit, dark spots blooming on the expensive wool. "I saved your life," he said calmly. His voice was steady, a deep resonance that seemed to vibrate in the empty street. "There is a difference. You told him I was with you," Ava accused, hugging her arms around herself. She was shivering now, the cold seeping into her bones. Or perhaps it was just the shock finally taking root. "You told him my brother's debt is under your protection. Do you have any idea what you have done? You have just involved yourself in my family's mess. I did not ask for your help." Luca took a step toward her, and for the first time, Ava saw a flash of irritation crack his stoic mask. He looked tired, his eyes sharp and assessing as they swept over her trembling form. "You are right," Luca said, his tone dropping an octave, becoming lethal in its quietness. "You did not ask. You walked into a lion's den wearing a target on your back. What was your plan, Ava? To talk them to death? Victor Hale does not negotiate with people who have nothing to offer. If I had not walked through that door, you would not be standing here arguing with me. You would be in the back of a van. Or worse." The blunt truth of his words struck her hard. She opened her mouth to retort, to defend her foolish bravery, but the words died in her throat. She remembered Victor's hand on her jaw, the way he had looked at her like she was a piece of meat. "I had to try," she whispered, the fight draining out of her, leaving her hollow. "There was no one else." "There is never anyone else," Luca murmured, more to himself than to her. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them until he loomed over her. He was tall, over 6 feet, and he blocked out the grim surroundings of the industrial park. "I remember you." Ava blinked, confusion overriding her fear for a split second. "What?" "The diner," Luca said. He studied her face, his gaze tracing the line of her jaw where Victor had touched her. "I have eaten there 3 times in the last month, late nights." "You were the only waitress on the floor." Ava stared at him. She tried to reconcile this terrifying crime lord with the blur of faces she served coffee to at 3 in the morning. She vaguely recalled a man in a suit who sat in the back booth, quiet, tipping well, never asking for refills. "I watched you handle a table of drunks 2 weeks ago," Luca continued, a strange note of admiration coloring his voice. "They were grabbing at you, calling you names. You did not flinch. You poured their coffee, looked them in the eye, and told them to leave or you would call the cops. You had a spine. I like that. So because I threw out some drunks, you decided to pay off a $15,000 debt?" Ava asked, incredulous. "No," Luca said. I decided that someone with that kind of fire does not deserve to be extinguished by a low-level thug like Victor. He reached out, his hand moving toward her face. Ava flinched instinctively, stepping back, her heel catching on a crack in the pavement. Her legs, which had been holding her up through sheer force of will, finally gave out. The delayed shock hit her system like a physical blow. Her knees buckled, the world tilting sideways as black spots danced in her vision. She did not hit the ground. Luca moved with a speed that defied his size. His arm swept around her waist, catching her before she could fall. He pulled her hard against his chest, her face colliding with the crisp cotton of his dress shirt. He smelled of rain, cedarwood, and something sharp like gunpowder. For a moment, neither of them moved. Ava gasped for air, her hands clutching the lapels of his suit coat to stay upright. She could feel the solid wall of muscle beneath the fabric, the steady, rhythmic thud of his heart against her cheek. It was terrifyingly intimate. "Breathe," Luca ordered, his voice no longer cold. It was low and rough, vibrating through his chest against hers. "I have you." He shifted his grip, one arm supporting her back, the other coming up to cup the side of her head. His fingers brushed her hair away from her face, the gesture unexpectedly gentle. His thumb grazed her temple, lingering there for a heartbeat too long. Ava looked up. His face was inches from hers. Up close, she could see the flecks of gray in his steel blue eyes, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with a sudden, electric tension that had nothing to do with fear. "I can walk," she managed to say, though her voice was barely a whisper. "Do not lie to me, Ava," Luca said softly. "You are done walking alone for tonight." He did not wait for her permission. He guided her firmly toward the open door of the sedan. Ava was too exhausted to resist. She slid into the leather interior, the scent of expensive car polish enveloping her. Luca climbed in beside her, the door closing with a heavy, sealed thud that shut out the world. "Where are you taking me?" Ava asked as the car pulled away from the curb, gliding smoothly over the potholes. "My mother. I have to go home." "You cannot go home," Luca said, staring straight ahead as the city lights blurred past the tinted windows. "Victor knows where you live. He knows your brother's name. If I drop you off at your apartment now, you are a sitting duck." "But you said—" Ava started, panic rising again. "You said I was under your protection." "Exactly," Luca cut in, turning to look at her. "And that means the Blades will be watching you to get to me, by claiming you. I made you a player in a game you do not understand. If you go home tonight, they will think I left you unguarded. They will snatch you just to test my resolve." Ava sank back into the seat, pressing her hand to her forehead. "Oh, God, what have I done?" "You survived," Luca said simply. "Focus on that." The drive was silent after that. They moved out of the industrial district, bypassing her neighborhood entirely, and headed toward the glittering skyline of downtown Graycrest. The car turned into the underground garage of a sleek, high-rise building that pierced the night sky like a needle. Luca led her up a private elevator that opened directly into a penthouse apartment. The space was vast, modern, and breathtakingly cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, the rain streaking the glass like tears. The furniture was low and Italian, leather and chrome, looking as if it had never been sat on. It was a beautiful cage. "It is a safe house," Luca explained, noticing her look around. He tossed his keys onto a marble island in the kitchen. "I keep a few properties off the books. No one knows about this place except my head of security. You will be safe here." Ava hugged herself, feeling small in the cavernous room. "I feel out of place." "You are," Luca said. He walked over to the kitchen and opened a cabinet. Pulling out a first aid kit, he motioned to one of the bar stools. "Sit, your arm is bleeding." Ava looked down. She hadn't even noticed. There was a shallow gash on her forearm, likely from when she had been shoved into the chair at the club. A thin line of dried blood marred her pale skin. She sat down obediently, Luca stepped between her knees, opening the kit on the counter behind her. The proximity was overwhelming. He took a cotton pad and soaked it in antiseptic. "This will sting," he warned. He took her arm in his hand. His grip was warm, his fingers calloused but careful. As he dabbed the antiseptic on the cut, Ava hissed, instinctively trying to pull back. Luca held her steady, not with force, but with a firm, grounding pressure. "Hold still," he murmured. He cleaned the wound with meticulous focus, his head bent low. Ava watched him. She saw the way his eyelashes cast shadows on his cheekbones, the focused set of his mouth. He treated her arm not like a burden, but like something precious that had been damaged on his watch. When he finished, he placed a bandage over the cut, smoothing the adhesive down with his thumb. His hand didn't move away immediately. His fingers lingered on the soft skin of her inner wrist, right over her pulse point. Her heart was hammering, and she knew he could feel it. Slowly. Luca looked up. Their eyes locked. The room went silent. The only sound, the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rain drumming against the glass. The tension that had sparked in the parking lot flared again, hotter this time. It was a magnetic pull, an irrational desire to bridge the gap between them. Luca's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. His pupils were dilated. Ava felt a sudden, insane urge to lean forward, to close the inches between them, to find out if the man who dealt in death tasted like life. Her breath hitched, a small, audible sound. The noise seemed to break the spell. Ava pulled her arm back, breaking the contact. She looked away, her cheeks burning. "Thank you," she said, her voice unsteady. Luca straightened up, stepping back and putting distance between them. He cleared his throat, the mask of the crime boss sliding back into place. "There is water in the fridge. I will get you some blankets for the couch." Later that night. The apartment was dim, lit only by the city glow from outside. Ava sat on the expansive gray sofa, her legs curled under her, a heavy wool blanket draped over her shoulders. Luca sat in the armchair opposite her, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had removed his suit jacket and tie, and the top buttons of his shirt were undone, revealing the corded muscles of his throat. They talked. Not the jagged, defensive sparring of earlier, but something quieter, something real. "My mother has heart failure," Ava said into the darkness, staring at her hands. "She needs a valve replacement. The insurance won't cover the full cost of the specialist. That is why Diego was gambling. He thought he could win enough to pay the deposit." Luca took a sip of his drink, watching her. "And you? You work 2 jobs to cover the rest?" "Someone has to," Ava said. "My father left when Diego was a baby. It has always been just us. If I stop working, the lights go out. If I stop worrying, the medicine runs out. I cannot afford to be weak. Luca." It was the first time she had used his name without spitting it out. The sound of it hung in the air. "You are not weak," Luca said. He swirled the ice in his glass. "I grew up in a house full of people, but I was always alone. My father was a boss. He taught me that family was an asset, like a bank account. You use it until it is empty." He looked at the window, his expression darkening. "I watched him trade people like playing cards. When I took over, I made a promise. I do not trade people, and I do not let people under my roof get hurt. I failed at that once. I won't fail again." He didn't elaborate, but the pain in his voice was jagged and old. Ava looked at him, seeing the boy he must have been, lonely, hardened, learning to be a weapon to survive his own father. "I was stupid tonight," Ava whispered, the shame returning. "Walking in there, I put everyone in danger. I was so desperate." Luca set his glass down on the table with a sharp click. He stood up and crossed the space between them in 2 strides. He stopped in front of her, crouching down so they were eye level. "Look at me," he commanded softly. Ava lifted her head. Luca reached out, his hand hovering for a second before he placed his fingers under her chin, tilting her face up toward him. His skin was warm against hers. "You are not stupid," he said, his voice husky and laced with a fierce sincerity that made her chest ache. "You were terrified, and you went anyway. Do you know how many men I have seen beg and cry in that room? Grown men. Killers. And you walked in there with your head high and told Victor Hale to go to hell." He leaned closer, his thumb stroking the line of her jaw. "You were braver than anyone in that room. Ava, including me." The air left the room. They were so close that Ava could feel the warmth of his breath on her lips. His gaze dropped to her mouth again, and this time, he didn't pull back immediately. The hunger in his eyes was naked, raw. Ava's lips parted slightly, a silent invitation she hadn't meant to give. It would be so easy to lean forward, to let him kiss her, to let him take the weight of the world off her shoulders for just a moment. Luca's hand tightened slightly on her chin. He leaned in, a fraction of an inch, then stopped. A muscle feathered in his jaw. He closed his eyes for a brief second, inhaling sharply, before he pulled his hand away and stood up, retreating to the safety of the shadows. "I will handle the blades," Luca said, his voice sounding rougher than before, as if he had swallowed gravel. "Your family will be watched. My men are already outside your mother's apartment. Diego is safe." He turned to look at her one last time, his silhouette stark against the window. "But you need to understand something. Ava, by staying here, by letting me protect you, you are stepping into my world. People will use you to get to me. They will see you as a weakness." "I am not weak," Ava repeated, though her voice trembled. "I know," Luca said. "That is what scares me." He walked toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. "Get some sleep. We have work to do tomorrow." Ava watched him go, the ghost of his touch still burning on her skin. She was terrified of the blades, terrified of the debt, and terrified of what this new life meant. But as she curled up under the blanket, listening to the rain, she realized the most terrifying thing of all was how safe she felt when Luca Voss looked at her. She was staying, for now. The week that followed was a blur of tinted windows, heavy locks, and the constant silent presence of men in dark suits. Ava Moreno had traded the exhaustion of poverty for the exhaustion of captivity. Though this cage was gilded with high thread count sheets and a refrigerator stocked with food she used to only dream of buying, her life became a series of carefully orchestrated movements. Every morning, a black SUV waited in the underground garage of the safe house to shuttle her to her mother's apartment. 2 guards. Men with necks as thick as tree trunks and eyes that scanned every rooftop would escort her to the front door and wait in the hallway while she visited. Inside the small, cramping apartment, the air felt heavy. Her mother, Maria, was recovering well, still believing Ava was working a lucrative temporary contract for a logistics firm that required long hours and travel. But Diego knew the truth. Ava sat at the kitchen table, watching her brother stare into a mug of cold coffee. The swagger was gone. The 19-year-old who had thought he could outsmart a shark like Victor Hale had been replaced by a boy who jumped at every shadow. "I saw a car parked across the street last night," Diego whispered, his voice cracking. "It sat there for an hour, just idling. Luca has men watching the building." "Diego," Ava said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. His palm was clammy. "Nothing is going to touch you. I promise." "You cannot promise that," Diego said, pulling his hand away to run it through his hair. "You are staying with him. With Voss. Do you know what people say about him? He is a monster." "Ava." "He is the reason you still have kneecaps," Ava snapped, her patience fraying. "And he is the only thing standing between us and the blades right now. So keep your head down, go to your classes, and come straight home. Do not give them an opening." Leaving him there was the hardest part. Walking out of the apartment, nodding to the guards, and slipping back into the armored womb of the SUV felt like a betrayal. She was safe in the penthouse. They were exposed. But Luca kept his word. The reports she received from the head of his security detail were precise and reassuring. No one had approached the family. The blades were circling, but the Voss syndicate was a wall they had not yet found a way to breach. To keep her mind off the terror gnawing at her gut, Luca put her to work. It started simply enough. He asked her to look over a few spreadsheets for a shipping company he owned, a legitimate front. He assured her, Ava sat at the long mahogany dining table in the penthouse, her laptop open, drowning in rows of data. It was comforting. Numbers made sense. Numbers did not carry guns or threaten to burn down buildings. By the third day, she had organized 3 years of chaotic ledgers into a streamlined, color-coded system. She was deep in the zone, chewing on the end of a pen, when a shadow fell over her screen. "You managed to make shipping manifests look like a work of art," Luca said. Ava jumped, her heart skipping a beat. She had not heard him approach. He moved with a quiet grace that was unnerving for a man of his size. He was wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms corded with muscle. "It is not art," Ava said, pushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "It is logic. Your previous accountant was either lazy or incompetent. There are duplicate entries everywhere." Luca pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. He was close. Too close. The scent of him, sandalwood, rain, and expensive espresso, drifted over her, clouding her focus. "Show me," he said. Ava turned the laptop toward him. "Look here. Column F. These transaction fees are listed twice, once under logistics and once under miscellaneous expenses. It looks like a clerical error, but when you cross-reference it with the dates in the quarterly report, the money disappears from the main account but never lands in the vendor account." Luca leaned in, his shoulder brushing against hers. The contact sent a jolt of electricity down Ava's arm, but she forced herself to keep pointing at the screen. "How much?" Luca asked, his voice hardening. "Over 6 months, nearly $80,000, Ava said. "It is small enough to be missed in the volume you move, but big enough to matter. Someone is siphoning it, leaking it out in drips." Luca stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. "Internal," he murmured. "Only 3 people have access to these specific ledgers. Then one of them is stealing from you," Ava said softly. Luca turned his head. His face was inches from hers. She could see the dark ring around his irises, the sharp cut of his cheekbones. The intensity of his gaze made her breath hitch. "You have a sharp eye. Ava Moreno," he said quietly. "I just pay attention to details," she managed to say, her voice sounding breathless to her own ears. "Most people look away when things get complicated." Luca said, "You look closer." He did not move away. For a long moment they just sat there, shoulder to shoulder, the silence between them filled with a static charge. Ava felt a sudden, irrational urge to lean into him, to rest her head on that solid shoulder. "You need to fix your pivot tables," she blurted out, breaking the tension. "They are a mess." Luca blinked, and then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It transformed him, softening the hard edges of the crime boss into something devastatingly human. "Teach me then," he said. And she did, for the next few hours. The dangerous world outside faded. It was just the two of them, the soft click of keys and the warmth of his body next to hers. They teased each other. He mocked her obsession with color coding, calling it a rainbow of bureaucracy. And she told him his filing system belonged in the Stone Age. It felt natural. It felt easy. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. 2 nights later, Luca took her out. "I need to meet a contact," he told her as she stood in the kitchen, nervously twisting a ring on her finger. "We found a trail on the money you flagged. My tech specialist has the footage we need to confirm who is making the transfers. I want you there to verify the transaction times." He took her to a place called the Velvet Room, not the grimy dive where she had met the Blades, but a high-end private lounge in the heart of the city. It was owned by the Syndicate, a fortress disguised as a playground for the rich. They entered through a private rear entrance, bypassing the thumping bass of the main club. Luca led her down a carpeted hallway to a private VIP room at the back. The room was soundproofed, wrapped in dark velvet and leather, lit by the warm glow of amber sconces. Through a one-way glass window, they could see the dance floor below, a sea of writhing bodies and flashing lights. But in here, it was quiet. 2 of Luca's men stationed themselves outside the heavy oak door. Inside, it was just Ava and Luca. "Sit," Luca said, gesturing to a plush leather sofa. My guy is running a few minutes behind. He's scrubbing the server logs to make sure we have the proof. Ava sat on the edge of the cushion, her nerves jangling. She was dressed in a simple black dress Luca had had delivered for her, sleek, elegant, and far more expensive than anything she had ever owned. She felt like an imposter in it. Luca walked over to a small bar in the corner and poured 2 glasses of wine. He brought one to her. "Drink," he said gently. "You look like you were waiting for a firing squad." Ava took the glass, her fingers brushing his. "I just want this to be over. Luca, I want to know who is betraying you so this can end." "It will," Luca promised. He sat down, not on the opposite chair but on the sofa next to her. He took a sip of his wine, watching her over the rim of the glass. "You have been wound tight for days. You hardly sleep. I hear you pacing the guest room at night." Ava looked down at her wine, swirling the dark liquid. "It is hard to sleep when you are waiting for the other shoe to drop." Soft music began to play in the room, piped in from a separate system than the club's heavy beats. It was a slow, soulful jazz track, the saxophone weeping a melancholy tune. Luca set his glass down on the low table. He stood up and held out his hand. "Dance with me," he said. Ava looked up, startled. "What? Now? We're waiting for intel on a mole." "The intel will get here when it gets here," Luca said. "Right now. You are vibrating with anxiety. Just once. Ava, loosen up. For 5 minutes. Do not be the girl who holds the world together. Just be here." Ava hesitated. It was absurd. It was reckless. But looking at his outstretched hand, she found she could not refuse him. She placed her hand in his. He pulled her up effortlessly. He did not pull her into a rigid ballroom hold. He stepped close, sliding one hand around her waist to rest on the small of her back, his touch firm and warm through the silk of her dress. Ava rested her left hand tentatively on his shoulder, her right hand clasped in his. They began to sway. Ava was stiff at first, her body mindful of the gun she knew he wore in a holster beneath his jacket, mindful of the violence he was capable of. But Luca moved with a fluidity that was hypnotic. He guided her slowly, turning her in the small space between the sofa and the bar. "Relax," he murmured, his voice a low rumble near her ear. "I have you." Ava let out a breath she did not know she was holding. She let her guard drop, just an inch. Her body softened against his. She felt the solid wall of his chest, the rhythmic, steady thud of his heartbeat beneath her palm. It was a strong, slow beat. It was the heartbeat of a man who was not afraid. The song shifted to something deeper, the bass notes vibrating in the floor. Luca pulled her closer. His hand on her back moved up slowly, his fingers tracing the line of her spine, leaving a trail of heat in their wake. Ava looked up. Luca was watching her. His eyes were dark, dilated in the dim light. The guarded expression he wore like armor was gone, replaced by a raw, hungry intensity that made Ava's knees weak. "You are dangerous," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I know," Luca replied softly. He lowered his head, his face inches from hers. "But not to you." He moved his hand from her shoulder to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing over her bottom lip. Ava shivered, her breath catching in her throat. "You have been haunting me," Luca confessed, his voice rough. "Since the moment I saw you standing in that back room, looking like a terrifying angel ready to go down fighting. I cannot get you out of my head. Ava, I look at spreadsheets and I see you. I look at the city and I wonder if you are safe." "Luca," she breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she was sure he could feel it. "Tell me to stop," Luca murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "Tell me to back off, and I will." Ava stared at him. She thought of the danger. She thought of the different worlds they came from. She thought of every reason she should push him away. But then she thought of the way he had stood between her and the blades, the way he had tended to the cut on her arm, the way he made her feel like she wasn't just surviving, but actually living. She did not tell him to stop. Instead, she curled her fingers into the lapels of his jacket and rose up on her tiptoes. "Don't stop," she whispered. Luca made a low sound in his throat, a mix of a groan and a growl. He closed the distance, pressing his mouth to hers. The kiss was not tentative. It was a collision. It was slow and searching, deep with pent-up longing that had been simmering between them for days. His lips were firm, moving against hers with a possessive hunger that stole the breath from her lungs. Ava responded with equal intensity. She opened to him, her hands sliding up his chest to wrap around his neck, her fingers threading into the thick hair at the nape of his neck. She pulled him closer, needing to eliminate every inch of space between them. Luca's arm tightened around her waist, lifting her slightly, pressing her body flush against his. She could feel the hard lines of his body, the power he held in check. He tasted of wine and danger. The kiss deepened, becoming a desperate, feverish thing. It was a claiming, it was a promise. For a moment, the world outside the room ceased to exist. There were no blades, no debts, no moles. There was only the heat of his skin, the taste of his mouth, and the overwhelming realization that she was falling for the monster who had saved her. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound was jarring, cutting through the haze of passion like a knife. Luca's phone, sitting on the table, vibrated aggressively against the glass surface. He did not stop immediately. He lingered for one more second, his lips brushing hers, before he pulled back with a sharp inhale. His forehead rested against hers for a beat, his breathing ragged. "Ignore it," Ava whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't," Luca said, his voice strained. "It is the secure line. It is the tech." He stepped back, the loss of his warmth hitting Ava like a physical blow. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her shaking legs, her lips still tingling from his touch. Luca picked up the phone. His face hardened instantly, the lover vanishing and the boss returning. "Talk to me," he said into the phone. He listened for a moment, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. His eyes, which had been warm only seconds ago, turned to ice. "Send it to me. Now." He hung up and looked at Ava. The look on his face made her blood run cold. "What is it?" she asked. "We have to go," Luca said, grabbing his jacket. "Now." "Luca, what happened?" "The blades," he said grimly. "They sent a video." They drove back to the safe house in silence. The air in the car was thick, but it was no longer heavy with desire. It was heavy with dread. Back in the penthouse, Luca connected his phone to the large monitor in the living room. Ava stood behind the sofa, afraid to get too close to the screen. "Do not look if you do not want to," Luca warned. "Show me," Ava said. The video played. It was shaky, filmed from the passenger seat of a moving car. It was night. The car was driving slowly down a street Ava knew better than her own name. It was her street. The camera panned to the side, zooming in on the brick building where her mother and Diego slept. The car slowed to a crawl. A voice from behind the camera, Victor's voice, laughed softly. "Nice place," Victor sneered on the recording. "Would be a shame if the gas line had a leak, or if the kid had an accident walking home." The video ended with a shot of a newspaper from that morning, proving the footage was current. Ava felt the room spin. She gripped the back of the sofa, her knuckles turning white. They were there. Tonight. While we were dancing. "They did not do anything," Luca said quickly, stepping toward her. "My men were posted at the entrance and the rear. If the blades had tried to get out of the car, they would be dead. This was a drive-by, a taunt. They are trying to rattle us." "It is working," Ava whispered. "They are probing for weaknesses. Luca, and they know exactly where to look." Luca paced the room, his energy restless and violent. "They are desperate. They know I cut off their supply lines yesterday. This is fear talking." "No," Ava said, turning to face him. "This is leverage. They know you care. They know I am with you." She looked at him, and the memory of the kiss they had shared less than an hour ago felt like a tragedy. "That video," Ava said, her voice shaking. "They are not just threatening me anymore. They are threatening me to hurt you. I have become a weapon they can use against you." "I will double the guard," Luca said instantly. "I will move your mother and Diego. Tonight, I have a place in the country, a fortress. They will be gone before sunrise." "And then what?" Ava asked. "I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, dragging my family from one fortress to another? If that is what it takes to keep you alive, yes," Luca said fiercely. He crossed the room and grabbed her shoulders, his grip tight. "You are not leaving. Ava, you are staying here, where I can see you, where I can protect you." "I am a prisoner," Ava said, tears stinging her eyes. "First to my poverty, now to your war. Better a prisoner than a corpse," Luca said darkly. "Is that what this is?" Ava demanded, pushing against his chest. "Just survival?" Because back in that room, it felt like something else. Luca went still. He looked down at her, the conflict raging in his eyes. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to tell her it was just business, just protection. But the taste of her was still on his lips. "It is not just survival," Luca admitted, his voice low and raw. "And that is why you have to stay. Because if they get you, if they touch you—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes said it all. If anything happened to her, he would burn the city to ash, and he wasn't sure he would survive the fire. Ava slumped, the fight draining out of her. She realized then that her independence, the thing she had prized above all else, the thing she had worked 2 jobs to maintain, was gone. She was no longer just Ava Moreno, the girl who handled everything alone. She was Ava, the woman the mafia boss loved, and that put a target on her forehead that was never coming off. "Move them," Ava whispered, looking away. "Move my mother and Diego. Get them out." "I will," Luca promised. He leaned his forehead against hers, a gesture of intimacy and desperation. "We will figure this out. We will find the mole. We will end this." Ava closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite the fear. She believed him. She had to. Because there was no going back now. She was in the deep end, and the only thing keeping her from drowning was the man holding her up. The vibrating phone on the glass coffee table sounded like a drill against bone in the silent penthouse. Ava Moreno stared at the screen, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. It was a message from an unknown number. No text, just an image. She picked it up, her fingers trembling. The photo was low resolution, grainy, likely taken in a hurry, but the subject was unmistakable. It was the corner store 3 blocks from her mother's apartment. The windows were shattered, the glass lying in jagged shards on the sidewalk. Red spray paint marred the brick facade above the awning. The message scrawled there was not a gang sign. It was a name, Diego. A second message popped up a moment later. "We know where Mom buys her milk. Tell Luca to pick up the phone." Guilt crashed over Ava like a tidal wave, cold and suffocating. She dropped the phone onto the cushion beside her, gasping for air. The North Side Blades were not just threatening her anymore. They were systematically dismantling the small, fragile world she had fought so hard to protect. They had vandalized the store not for money, but to send a message. Luca's walls have cracks. Luca was gone. He had left an hour ago for a meeting with his capos, his face grim and unreadable. He had left her with strict instructions. Do not leave the penthouse. Do not open the door. But looking at that photo, at the violence bleeding into her mother's neighborhood, the order felt less like protection and more like a shackle. How could she sit here in air-conditioned luxury while her mother walked past shattered glass? Ava stood up, her decision hardening in her chest like concrete. She needed to see them. She needed to know they were physically safe, not just rely on the sanitized reports from Luca's security team. She walked to the front door. Standing guard in the hallway was not the usual mountain of a man, Marcus, but a younger guard named Mateo. He looked barely older than Diego, with an ill-fitting suit and eyes that darted nervously. "Miss Moreno," Mateo said, straightening up as she opened the door. "Mister, Voss said you're to stay inside. My mother is having a heart episode." Ava lied. The falsehood tasted like ash in her mouth. But she swallowed it down. She held up her phone, showing him a generic missed call screen she had pulled up. "I need to go to her. Right now. If you do not take me, I am walking. And if something happens to me on the street, Luca will blame you." Mateo paled. He looked at the elevator, then back at Ava. He was terrified of disobeying orders, but he was clearly more terrified of being responsible for Ava getting hurt on the sidewalk. I should call him, Matteo stammered. There is no time, Ava snapped, channeling every ounce of authority she had watched Luca wield. Drive me. We will be there and back in 40 minutes. No one has to know. Matteo hesitated for one fatal second, and Ava pushed past him toward the elevator. Are you coming, or am I taking a taxi? 10 minutes later, they were speeding toward her old neighborhood in one of the backup sedans. Ava sat in the back, twisting her hands together. The city blurred past, gray and hostile. When they pulled up to the apartment building, the street was quiet, too quiet. Ava told Matteo to keep the engine running and bolted up the stairs before he could argue. She burst into the apartment, breathless. Her mother was sitting at the kitchen table, clutching a rosary, her face pale. Diego was pacing the small living room, looking like a trapped animal. Ava! Maria cried out, half rising from her chair. What are you doing here? Diego said you were away on business. I am fine, Mama, Ava said, rushing to hug her. She felt the frailty of her mother's frame, the trembling in her bones. I heard about the store. I had to check on you. They broke the windows, Maria whispered, fear trembling in her voice. Mr. Henderson was so scared. Ava, what is happening? Why did they write Diego's name? Ava pulled back, looking at her brother. Diego would not meet her eyes. He looked sick with shame. It is just a misunderstanding. Mama. Ava lied again, hatred for the blades burning in her gut. Diego had an argument with some boys from the neighborhood. It is over. I promise. She spent 20 minutes soothing her mother, making tea, checking the locks on the windows. Every second that ticked by felt like a countdown. She was torn. Half of her wanted to scream at Diego for bringing this darkness to their door, and the other half wanted to wrap him in a blanket and hide him from the world. I have to go, Ava said finally, checking her watch. I have to get back to work, but I am sending someone to stay in the hallway, okay? A friend, just for safety. She kissed her mother's forehead and grabbed Diego by the arm, dragging him to the door. Do not leave the house, she hissed at him. If you step 1 foot outside, I will kill you myself before the blades get the chance. She ran back down the stairs, her heart pounding. She pushed open the heavy front door of the building and stepped onto the sidewalk. Matteo was waiting by the car, looking anxious. Ava hurried toward him. As she reached for the door handle, a silver sedan rolled slowly past them. It did not speed up. It cruised by with predatory slowness. The passenger window was rolled down. Ava froze. A man in the passenger seat raised a phone. Click. The flash was invisible in the daylight, but the gesture was unmistakable. The man grinned, a flash of gold teeth, and the car accelerated, screeching around the corner and disappearing into traffic. Miss Moreno, Matteo shouted, reaching for his weapon, but it was too late. Ava stood paralyzed on the sidewalk. They had seen her. They knew she had left the safety of the penthouse. They knew she was vulnerable. Get in the car, Matteo yelled, panic seizing his voice. Ava scrambled into the back seat. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold her phone. She needed to tell him. She could not hide this. If the Blades knew she was out in the open, they might move on the safe house. They might move on Luca. She typed the text, her fingers numb. I went to see my mom. A car drove by. They took a photo of me. She hit send. The response came 10 seconds later. Get back here. Now. The text was followed by another. Do not stop for red lights. The ride back to the penthouse was a blur of terror. Ava felt nausea rolling in her stomach. She had wanted to prove she wasn't helpless, that she could still take care of her family, but all she had done was paint a target on her back and hand the Blades the gun. When the elevator doors opened into the penthouse, Luca was waiting. He was not wearing his jacket. His tie was gone, his collar unbuttoned, his hair disheveled as if he had been running his hands through it. The moment he saw her, the relief on his face vanished, replaced by a fury so intense it sucked the air out of the room. Leave us, Luca barked at Matteo. The young guard didn't need to be told twice. He fled back into the elevator. the doors sliding shut with a soft whoosh. "Are you insane?" Luca roared. The sound echoed off the high ceilings, making Ava flinch. "I gave you one order, Ava. Stay inside where it is safe. They smashed the store windows." Ava shouted back, the adrenaline of the last hour turning into defensive anger. "They sent me a picture. I had to make sure my mother was okay. You have a phone." Luca stepped closer, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "You have my security team. You could have called. Instead, you took a rookie guard and paraded yourself in front of the people who want to kill you. I am not one of your soldiers. Luca." Ava threw her purse onto the sofa. "I am not someone you can just order around. That is my family out there. I cannot just sit here drinking wine while they are being terrorized. You think this is a game?" Luca's voice dropped, deadly and low. He closed the distance between them, looming over her. "You think because I put a guard at the door, you are invincible. That car that took your photo, they could have put a bullet in your head just as easily. And what would your mother do then?" "I had to see her," Ava yelled, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. "I hate this. I hate being locked up. I hate feeling helpless. I am trying to keep you alive." Luca grabbed her by the shoulders, his grip hard, desperate. "Do you have any idea what went through my mind when I got that text? Do you know what it felt like to think I had lost you?" "Then let me go." Ava shoved at his chest, her hands slamming against the solid wall of muscle. "If I am such a liability, if I am just a weakness, then let me go." "I can't," Luca shouted, his composure shattering completely. They stood there, chests heaving, breaths coming in ragged gasps. The air between them crackled with violence and fear, a volatile mix that was one spark away from exploding. Ava looked up at him, her eyes wide, seeing the raw terror behind his rage. He wasn't angry because she had disobeyed him. He was angry because he was terrified of a world without her in it. "You are controlling," Ava breathed, her voice shaking. "You are arrogant and you are controlling." "And you are reckless," Luca countered, his eyes dropping to her mouth. "You are stubborn and you are driving me out of my mind." The anger didn't vanish, but it twisted. It morphed into something hotter, something desperate and consuming. Luca didn't ask this time. He didn't hesitate. He groaned, a sound torn from his throat, and crashed his mouth down onto hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was rough, frantic, fueled by the adrenaline of the scare and the fury of the argument. Ava gasped against his lips, and he used the opening to deepen the kiss, his tongue sweeping into her mouth with possessing intent. Ava didn't fight him. She responded with equal force. She grabbed the front of his shirt, bunching the expensive fabric in her fists, pulling him closer. She needed to feel him. She needed to know he was real, that she was alive, that they were both here. Luca walked her backward, his movements urgent. Ava's back hit the wall, the impact knocking the breath out of her, but she didn't care. She wrapped her leg around his waist, pulling him flush against her. His hands were everywhere, sliding up her ribs, gripping her waist, tangling in her hair to tilt her head back for better access. He kissed her jaw, her throat, the sensitive spot behind her ear, before returning to her mouth with a hunger that bordered on pain. "You scare the hell out of me," Luca growled against her lips, biting her lower lip gently. "Do not ever do that again." "Make me," Ava challenged, breathless, her fingers threading into his dark hair, pulling him down. The world narrowed to the heat of their bodies, the friction of fabric, the desperate slide of lips and tongues. It was a claiming, an affirmation of life in the face of death. Ava felt a fire igniting in her belly, a need so sharp it frightened her. She wanted to crawl inside his skin. She wanted to forget the blades, the debt, the danger. Luca's hand slid up her thigh, his thumb pressing into soft flesh, and Ava moaned. The sound seemed to snap something in Luca. He froze. His breathing was harsh, ragged, sawing in the quiet room. He pressed his forehead against hers, his hands gripping her hips tightly, holding her still. "Stop," he whispered, his voice wrecked. "We have to stop." Ava blinked, dazed, her body humming with unspent energy. "Why?" Luca pulled back, tearing himself away from her warmth. He paced a few steps away, running a hand over his face. He looked shattered. "Because the timing is wrong," he said, his voice rough. "Because you are scared and full of adrenaline, and I'm angry. And if we do this now, it will not be right. And I need to keep you safe, even from me." Ava slid down the wall until her feet hit the floor. She straightened her clothes, her face burning. She felt exposed, raw. "Luca," she started. "No," he said, holding up a hand. He took a deep breath, forcing the mask of the boss back into place, though the cracks were visible. "We need to focus. The Blades knowing you are here changes everything, but it also confirms something." He walked over to the side table and picked up a tablet. He didn't look at her, likely because if he did, he would lose his resolve. "Come here," he said. "Look at this." Ava took a shaky breath and walked over to him. She forced her mind to switch gears, to lock away the passion and bring out the analyst. On the screen were the spreadsheets she had flagged days ago. "I had my tech team run the trace you suggested," Luca said, his voice steadying. "The money that is disappearing, it is not just being stolen. It is being funneled." He tapped the screen. "See these transfers? Small amounts, under the radar. They are going to a shell company registered in the Caymans, but look at the IP address of the user authorizing the transfers." Ava leaned in, her shoulder brushing his arm. This time, he didn't pull away. "It is internal," Ava whispered, reading the data. "It is coming from inside your main server. Someone in this building," Luca said grimly. "Someone with top-level clearance is feeding the Blades money. My money. They are using my own resources to fund the war against me. And the information," Ava added, her mind racing. "The vandalized store, the photo today. They knew I was gone. The mole told them the moment I left the building." "Yes," Luca said, "which means we are compromised. High level." Ava stared at the numbers. The fear was still there, but it was being replaced by a cold, sharp determination. She was tired of being the victim. She was tired of being the bait. "We can catch them," Ava said. She looked up at Luca. "We can use the system against them." "How?" "I can create a ghost trail," Ava said, her voice gaining strength. "I can set up a series of fake transactions. Make it look like you are moving a massive amount of liquid cash to a new holding company. Something too big to ignore." "Bait," Luca said, understanding immediately. "Exactly," Ava nodded. "We set up the transfer. We make it look legitimate. But we tag the data packets. If anyone accesses the file, if anyone tries to divert the funds or send the information to the Blades, the tag will trigger a silent alarm. It will give us the exact terminal and user ID." Luca looked at her. The admiration in his eyes was back, warring with the protective fear. "It is risky. If they realize it is a trap." "They won't," Ava said, "because I am going to make the numbers look messy. Like a rushed panic move. They will think you are scrambling to hide assets. They will get greedy." "You are dangerous," Luca murmured, a small, crooked smile touching his lips. "You taught me," Ava replied. For the next 4 hours, they worked. They sat side by side at the dining table, the tension of the argument replaced by a seamless, silent rhythm. Ava built the financial architecture of the trap, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Luca coordinated the leak, planting rumors with specific lieutenants, feeding the false information into the pipeline. They didn't speak much, but the communication was constant. A touch on the elbow to draw attention to a screen, a shared glance when a piece of code lined up perfectly, a nod of approval. They were a team, a unit. By the time they finished, the sun had set, and the city lights were glittering below them like a carpet of diamonds. Ava stood up, stretching her stiff back. She walked out onto the balcony, needing fresh air. The wind was cool, whipping strands of hair across her face. She heard the sliding door open behind her. Luca stepped out. He didn't say anything. He just took off his suit jacket and draped it gently over her shoulders. The silk lining was warm from his body heat. Ava pulled the jacket tighter around herself, inhaling his scent. Luca stood beside her, leaning his forearms on the railing, looking out at the city he ruled. "We are going to end this," he said quietly. "I know," Ava said. He turned his head to look at her. In the moonlight, his face was softer, the hard lines of the mafia boss smoothed away. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered on her neck, his thumb stroking her pulse. There was no shouting now, no frantic grabbing, just a quiet, heavy realization settling between them. "I'm sorry I yelled," Luca whispered. "I'm sorry I ran," Ava replied. He moved closer, sliding his arm around her waist, pulling her into his side. Ava rested her head on his shoulder, the wool of his shirt scratching her cheek. It felt like armor. They stood there in silence, watching the world below. They both knew the plan they had built was dangerous. They both knew the mole was close, but in that moment, standing high above the chaos, Ava knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore, and God help anyone who tried to hurt the man holding her. The trap was silent, invisible, and lethal. For 3 days, the penthouse apartment became a war room. Ava Moreno sat at the long dining table, her eyes scanning lines of code and transaction logs until they blurred into a stream of neon green. She had constructed a financial labyrinth, a series of shell companies and digital dead ends designed to look like a desperate attempt to hide assets. She moved money, ghost funds really, from the syndicate's primary holding accounts into a new, unsecured offshore entity she had named Red Horizon across the room. Luca Voss played his part with terrifying precision. He did not touch a computer. He worked the phones. He spoke in hushed, urgent tones to his lieutenants, letting slip fragments of information about a high-value shipment of cash and weapons that was being moved to a warehouse in the shipping district to avoid a federal freeze. It was a lie. There was no shipment. There was only a dusty, abandoned warehouse that Luca had rigged with high-definition surveillance cameras and motion sensors 12 hours ago. "The bait is taken," Ava said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the air conditioning. She pointed to her screen. "Someone just accessed the Red Horizon ledger. They pinged the location of the physical assets. The IP address routes back to a secure terminal in your downtown office." Luca walked over, placing a hand on the back of her chair. He leaned over her shoulder, watching the cursor blink. "Time? 2 minutes ago," Ava said. Luca straightened up and picked up a remote control, turning on the wall of monitors that displayed the live feed from the empty warehouse. "Now we wait." They did not have to wait long. 40 minutes later, a convoy of 3 vans screeched into the frame on the central monitor. Men in dark clothing spilled out, carrying crowbars and assault rifles. They moved with the aggressive, chaotic energy of the North Side Blades. Ava watched, her breath held tight in her chest. As Victor Hale stepped out of the lead van, he pointed at the warehouse doors, shouting orders that the audio pickup barely caught. The men smashed the locks and swarmed inside, expecting millions in cash and weaponry. Instead, they found an empty floor and a single wooden crate in the center of the room. On the screen, Victor kicked the crate open. It was empty. He spun around, screaming in rage, kicking the wood into splinters. "Got you," Luca whispered. His voice was cold, devoid of triumph. It was the sound of a judge passing a death sentence. He turned away from the screen, looking at Ava. The timestamp on the server access was 40 minutes ago. The drive time from the north side to that warehouse is 35 minutes. That means the call was made immediately. "It has to be someone in the room with you when you made the call," Ava said, her stomach twisting. "Who knew about the shipment?" 3 people, Luca said. He walked to the window, staring out at the city that suddenly looked like a chessboard of betrayals. "My chief of security, Marcus, my lawyer, Silas, and one of my oldest lieutenants, Owen." The silence that followed was heavy. Ava could see the tension in Luca's shoulders, the way his hands clenched into fists. These were men he had broken bread with, men he had trusted with his life for a decade. "I'm sorry," Ava said softly. Luca turned, his face a mask of hardened stone. "Do not be. You just saved us from bleeding out. But now the Blades know they have been played." Victor looked humiliated. He will lash out. He will not wait for an opening anymore. He will try to tear everything down. He walked back to the table, his expression shifting from grief to resolve. We have to move. If they know I tricked them, they will assume I am tightening security. They will expect me to hole up. So we stay here? Ava asked. No, Luca said. We give them what they want. We give them you. Ava stiffened. What? Not really, Luca added quickly, stepping closer and taking her hands. His grip was firm, grounding. We need them to believe that you are no longer under my protection, that I have discarded you. If they think you are out of the picture, they will stop using you as leverage against me. They will think you are just a civilian again. A fake breakup, Ava realized, the logic settling in even as her heart gave a painful thud. A public one, Luca corrected. Tonight, at the Velvet Room. I need to make a scene. I need to make it look like you are a liability I can no longer afford. I will send you away. You will go to your mother's place, but you will not be alone. I will have a shadow team on you, so deep undercover even you won't see them. But to the world and to the mole, you will be abandoned. It is dangerous, Ava said. It is the only way to flush out the mole, Luca said intensely. The mole will contact the blades the moment I cut you loose. They will try to pick you up, and when they make their move, my team will be there to take them down and trace the call back to the traitor. Ava looked at him. She saw the fear behind his tactical brilliance. He hated this plan. He hated using her as bait, even with a safety net. Okay, Ava said. Let's do it. 3 hours later, the Velvet Room was pulsing with music and low light. Ava stood near the bar, holding a drink she had not tasted. She wore the same black dress she had worn the night they danced, but tonight, it felt like a costume. Luca stood 10 feet away, talking to a group of associates. Owen was there. He was a wiry man with a nervous smile, nodding too eagerly at everything Luca said. Luca caught Ava's eye. He gave a barely perceptible nod. It was time. Ava walked over to him, forcing a look of impatience onto her face. Luca, can we go? I'm tired of standing here. Luca spun around, his movement sharp and aggressive. The conversation around them died instantly. You are tired? Luca said, his voice loud enough to carry over the music. I am in the middle of business. Ava, you know, the business that pays for the clothes on your back? I just asked a question. Ava shot back, her voice trembling slightly, not from acting, but from the terrifying reality of shouting at a mafia boss in front of his crew. You promised we would leave an hour ago. I promise a lot of things, Luca sneered, taking a step toward her. Maybe I am tired of fulfilling them. You are becoming a heavy weight to carry. Ava, always complaining, always needing to be watched. I have a war to fight, and I am spending half my resources babysitting a waitress. The insult stung, sharp and precise. The room went deadly silent. Even the bartender stopped wiping glasses. Is that all I am to you? Ava demanded, tears of genuine hurt pricking her eyes. A liability? You are a distraction, Luca shouted, slamming his hand onto the table. And I am done with distractions. I am done with you. He gestured to the door. Get out! Luca! Ava started, her voice breaking. I said get out, Luca roared. Go back to your little life. Take your brother's debt and handle it yourself. I am finished with the Moreno charity case. Ava stared at him, her face burning with humiliation. She didn't have to act the part of the heartbroken woman. The cruelty in his eyes, however feigned, cut deep. She turned and ran, pushing through the crowd, ignoring the whispers and the stares. She burst out of the rear exit, into the cool, damp alleyway behind the club. She leaned against the brick wall, gasping for air, shaking from the adrenaline. It was done. She was out. The heavy metal door opened behind her. She flinched, expecting a bouncer, or maybe Owen coming to gloat. It was Luca. He closed the door and moved toward her with a speed that was almost frightening. Before she could speak, he crashed into her, pressing her body back against the rough brick. I am sorry, he groaned, his voice a low, hoarse rasp. I am so sorry, Ava. His hands framed her face, his thumbs wiping away the tears she hadn't realized were falling. He kissed her, not with the hunger of the other night, but with a desperate, apologetic tenderness. He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her cheeks, and finally her mouth. "I didn't mean it," he whispered against her lips. "Not a single word. You are everything, you hear me? Everything." "It felt real," Ava whispered back, gripping his lapels, pulling him closer to anchor herself. "You were so cold." "I had to be," Lucas said, his forehead resting against hers. "They are watching. Owen is watching. If they see a crack in the act, they will know it is a trap. I had to break us to save you." He ran his hands down her arms, gripping her waist tightly. "There is a car waiting at the end of the block. Not one of mine. A taxi. It looks random. Take it to your mother's. Do not look for my men, but know they are there. Marcus has his best snipers on the rooftops. You are safe. Come with me," Ava pleaded softly, dread curling in her stomach. "I have to go back inside," Luca said, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. "I have to finish the performance. I have to let Owen think he has won." He kissed her again. A lingering, searing pressure that felt like a vow. "This is the last time, Ava. The last time we play games. Tomorrow, when the mole is buried, I am coming for you, and I am never letting you walk out that door again." He pulled away abruptly, as if tearing off a limb. He turned and went back inside the club, leaving Ava alone in the alley. The silence rushed in, cold and absolute. Ava wrapped her arms around herself, the ghost of his warmth fading too quickly. She walked to the end of the block, found the taxi, and gave the driver her mother's address. The ride was a blur. When she arrived at the apartment, the building looked normal. The streetlights flickered. A cat scurried under a parked car. She went upstairs. Diego opened the door, looking surprised. "Ava?" he asked. "I thought you were at the safe house." "Luca and I." "We had a fight," Ava said, walking past him and dropping her purse on the table. "It is over. Diego, he kicked me out." "He what?" Diego asked, shock warring with relief on his face. "So, we are on our own again?" "Yeah," Ava said, her voice hollow. "We are on our own." She went through the motions of normalcy. She cooked dinner for her mother, stirring pasta sauce while Maria talked about a game show she had watched. She ate. She washed the dishes. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. All the while, she felt the phantom gaze of Luca's snipers outside. She trusted him. She trusted his plan. At 10 o'clock, the kitchen bin was full. "I will take the trash out, Mama," Ava said, tying up the bag. "Be careful, mija," Maria said from the couch. "It is dark. I will be right back," Ava promised. She walked down the 3 flights of stairs, the heavy bag bumping against her leg. She pushed open the back door of the building that led to the alley where the dumpsters were kept. The alley was dark, illuminated only by a single flickering bulb above the door. Ava walked to the dumpster, lifted the heavy plastic lid, and tossed the bag in. She dusted her hands off and turned to go back inside. A shadow detached itself from the wall near the fire escape. Ava froze. "Who is there?" "Just a friend," a voice whispered. It wasn't one of Luca's men. It wasn't Marcus. Before Ava could scream, a van roared down the alley. Headlights killed, tires crunching on gravel. The side door slid open. 2 men in ski masks lunged at her. Ava didn't freeze. She fought. She swung her fist, connecting with the jaw of the first attacker. He grunted, stumbling back. She kicked out, aiming for the knee of the second man, but he was ready. He caught her leg and yanked. Ava hit the ground hard, the gravel scraping the skin off her palms. She scrambled backward, opening her mouth to scream for the snipers. For the shadow team Luca had promised. Where are they? She thought frantically. Where are the guards? A heavy boot slammed into her ribs. Pain exploded in her side, robbing her of breath. She gasped, curling into a ball. "Grab her!" a voice hissed. Rough hands seized her arms, dragging her toward the waiting van. Ava thrashed, clawing at the fabric of their sleeves, kicking blindly. "Luca!" She managed to wheeze out, a broken, desperate sound. A black cloth bag was jammed over her head, plunging her into suffocating darkness. Strong arms lifted her, tossing her onto the metal floor of the van like a sack of flour. The door slammed shut, tires squealed, and then silence. Back at the penthouse. Luca stood in the center of the room, staring at the map on the table. He was waiting for the mole to make a call, waiting for the signal that the Blades had tried to approach Ava's apartment. His phone rang. He snatched it up. "Report. Boss," Marcus's voice was shaking. "We found them." "Found who?" Luca demanded. "Did the Blades make a move on Ava?" "No, boss," Marcus said. "We found the shadow team, the 2 men I put on Ava's building." "Found them?" Luca felt a cold pit open in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "They are dead." Luca, throat slit, bodies dumped in the basement. "They never even got to radio in." The phone nearly cracked in Luca's grip. "And Ava? She is gone." Luca threw the phone against the wall. It shattered, pieces of plastic and glass raining down on the expensive hardwood. He let out a roar of pure, primal rage that shook the walls. "Owen," he bellowed. The lieutenant, who had been sitting nervously on the sofa waiting for the strategy meeting to resume, jumped up. "Boss, what is it?" Luca moved across the room like a blur. He grabbed Owen by the throat and slammed him onto the dining table, scattering the maps and papers. "You told them!" Luca screamed, his face inches from Owen's. "You told them about the shadow team. That is the only way they could have taken them out without a sound." I don't know what you're talking about," Owen choked out, his face turning purple. "Luca, please, we are family." "You are a rat." Luca tightened his grip, cutting off the man's air. "Where did they take her? Tell me, or I will peel the skin off your bones right here." Owen clawed at Luca's hand, his eyes bulging. "The docks," he wheezed. "Warehouse 4B. Victor, he wants you. She's just bait." Luca threw Owen to the floor. "Marcus," he shouted to the head of security who had just burst through the door. "Lock him up. If she has a single scratch on her, he dies slowly." Luca turned to the door, checking the load on his pistol. His hands were steady, but his heart was a blackened ruin. "Get the car," Luca ordered, his voice dropping to a terrifying calm. "We are going to the docks." Ava woke up to the smell of rust and seawater. The bag was ripped from her head. She blinked against the harsh glare of a spotlight that was pointed directly at her face. She was tied to a metal chair. Her ribs throbbed with every breath, a sharp, stabbing pain that made her nauseous. Her wrists were bound behind her with zip ties that bit into her skin. "Welcome back, Sleeping Beauty," a voice drawled. Ava squinted into the darkness beyond the light. Victor Hale stepped into the circle of illumination. He was smiling, but his eyes were dead. "Where am I?" Ava rasped. "The end of the line," Victor said. He walked around her chair, trailing a finger along her shoulder. Ava shuddered, recoiling from his touch. "You think Luca is coming for you?" Victor laughed softly. "He broke up with you. Remember, publicly, loudly." "He will come," Ava said, lifting her chin despite the pain. "He knows what you are." "Oh, I count on it," Victor said. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of peppermint and rot. "That little show at the club, it was cute, but I knew it was fake the moment Owen texted me. Luca Voss doesn't throw away his toys. He hoards them." Victor pulled a tablet from his jacket pocket and tapped the screen. He held it up so Ava could see. It was a live feed of the warehouse entrance. "This place is a kill box." "Ava," Victor whispered. "Snipers in the rafters. Explosives at the doors. The moment your boyfriend steps foot on this property to save you, he is a dead man." Ava stared at the screen, horror washing over her. "You are not a hostage," Victor said, straightening up and checking his watch. "You are the cheese in the mousetrap, and the rat is on his way." The penthouse was silent, save for the ragged breathing of the man zip-tied to the heavy oak dining chair. Owen, the lieutenant who had stood by Luca's side for 7 years, now looked like a stranger, his face swollen, his eyes darting around the room in feral panic. Luca Voss stood over him, his jacket discarded, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal the tension in his forearms. He did not yell. The time for shouting had passed. Now, there was only a cold, terrifying calculation. "Warehouse 4B, Luca repeated, his voice devoid of inflection. "How many men?" 20? Owen wheezed, blood staining his teeth. "Maybe 25. Victor called in favors from the Southside crews. They are waiting for you. Luca." They have the high ground. Snipers on the catwalks. Explosives rigged at the main doors. You walk in there. You die. Luca turned away. Walking to the window, the city lights blurred in the distance. A mocking reminder of the life he was trying to build. The life that was currently tied to a chair in a damp warehouse. Rage, hot and volcanic, threatened to consume him, but he forced it down, locking it behind a wall of ice. Panic would kill Ava. Strategy would save her. "Get him out of my sight," Luca ordered the guards. "Hand him over to the police in the morning, along with the evidence of the embezzlement. Let the law bury him." As Owen was dragged away, weeping, Luca turned to his inner circle. Marcus, his head of security, and 3 other men he had known since they were stealing hubcaps in the slums. They looked at him, waiting for the order to burn the city down, but what they saw in Luca's eyes was not just the fury of a dawn, it was fear, a deep, human terror that he was about to lose the only thing that made the throne worth sitting on. "We are not going in the front," Luca said, pointing to the blueprints Marcus had spread on the table. "Owen told them I would come charging in like a bull, so we give them a bull." He traced a line on the map. "We send the armored SUV to the main gate. Remote driving, flashy, loud, draw every eye and every gun to that entrance." "And us?" Marcus asked. "We go in through the drainage tunnels," Luca said, tapping a forgotten access point near the water line. "We come up from the floor, behind their lines. We take out the snipers first. Silent, clean." He looked up, meeting the eyes of his men. "We do not lose her. Do you understand? We bring her home, or we do not come back." The air in Warehouse 4B tasted of brine, old copper, and despair. Ava Moreno sat in the center of the vast, hollow space, her wrists screaming in protest against the zip ties binding her to the metal chair. A single, harsh spotlight beat down on her, blinding her to the darkness beyond the circle of illumination. But she could hear them, the shuffle of boots, the click of safety catches being disengaged, the low, cruel laughter of men who thought they had already won. Her ribs throbbed with a dull, sickening ache where the boot had connected, but she forced herself to breathe through it. "Do not panic," she told herself, hearing Luca's voice in her head. "Panic is a cage. Look for the key." She scanned the room, squinting against the glare. To her left, a guard was leaning against a stack of crates, his weapon slung carelessly over his shoulder. He was young, bored, and more interested in the phone glowing in his hand than the prisoner. To her right, another guard was pacing, but his limp suggested an old injury. Ava shifted her weight. The chair was old, the metal legs rusted and uneven, behind her back, where her hands were bound. The metal frame of the seat had a jagged, peeling edge of chrome. It was a long shot. It was barely a chance. But it was all she had. She waited until the bored guard let out a laugh at something on his screen. Ava scraped the chair leg against the concrete floor, a loud, jarring screech. "Hey!" the pacing guard shouted. "Sit still!" "My leg is cramping!" Ava snapped back, her voice hoarse but defiant. "You tie me up like an animal and expect me to be comfortable?" "Shut up," the guard muttered, turning his back to resume his patrol. Under the cover of his movement, Ava began to work. She sawed the plastic tie against the jagged metal edge of the chair, back and forth. It was slow, agonizing work. The metal bit into her skin, slicking her wrists with blood, but she grit her teeth and kept moving. Friction, she thought, just a little more friction. Footsteps echoed on the concrete. Victor Hale walked into the light, holding a tablet. He looked manic, his eyes wide with adrenaline. "It is time," Victor announced, grinning at Ava. "Let us call your boyfriend and show him what he threw away." Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. She needed more time. The plastic was fraying. She could feel it giving way, but it wasn't broken yet. "He won't answer," Ava said, forcing a sneer onto her face. "He told you. He's done with me. You're just embarrassing yourself, Victor." Victor's smile faltered. He stepped closer, grabbing her chin. "He will answer. He has an ego. He wants to see you beg." "I do not beg," Ava spat, "and neither does he. You are small time, Victor. That is why the Voss syndicate runs the city and you run a warehouse full of rats." Victor's face twisted in rage. He raised his hand to strike her, and for a second, the guards looked away, focused on their boss's temper. Snap. The zip tie on her left wrist gave way. Ava kept her hands behind her back, her posture unchanged. She didn't breathe. She waited. Victor lowered his hand, laughing shakily. "Nice try. You want me to hit you? You want to look like a martyr? No, I want you pretty for the camera." He tapped the screen of the tablet. The video call ringtone echoed in the silent warehouse. It rang once, twice. The screen connected. Luca's face filled the frame. He was sitting in the back of a car, the city lights blurring behind him. He looked calm, terrifyingly calm. "Victor," Luca said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that made the tablet shake in Victor's hand. "Look who it is," Victor taunted, turning the screen so Luca could see Ava tied to the chair. "I found something you lost, Voss. She looks a little lonely. I thought maybe we could make a trade. Your territory for the girl." Ava stared at the screen, locking eyes with Luca. She saw the flicker in his gaze, a micro-expression of relief that she was alive, followed instantly by a darkness that promised death. "She's not for trade," Luca said softly, "and neither is my city." "Then she dies," Victor snarled, pulling a pistol from his waistband and pressing the barrel to Ava's temple. The cold metal made her flinch, but she kept her eyes on Luca. "Listen to me closely. Victor," Luca said, "if you pull that trigger, there is no hole deep enough to hide you. Touching her was the last mistake you will ever make." "You are bluffing," Victor laughed, though sweat was beading on his forehead. "You are miles away." On the screen, Luca raised his hand. He made a sharp, downward motion. "I am closer than you think," Luca whispered. Click. The warehouse plunged into absolute darkness. For a second, there was silence. Then, chaos erupted. "Get the lights!" Victor screamed. Glass shattered high above as skylights were blown inward. Muzzle flashes lit up the catwalks like strobe lights, revealing men rappelling down from the darkness. The sound of suppressed gunfire, thwip, 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 echoed off the walls. Ava didn't hesitate. The moment the lights died, she ripped her left hand free, tore the loose tie from her right wrist, and threw herself sideways. "She is loose!" a guard shouted. Gunfire chewed up the concrete where her chair had been a second ago. Ava scrambled on her hands and knees, ignoring the pain in her ribs, and dove behind a stack of shipping crates. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing the warehouse in a sickly red glow. The main doors blew inward with a deafening roar, not from the decoy truck, but from charges set on the hinges. Through the smoke, Luca Voss walked in. He moved with a fluid, lethal grace, a pistol in each hand. He was not taking cover, he was advancing. Two of Victor's men rushed him. Luca dropped them with two precise shots to the chest, never breaking his stride. "Ava!" he roared, his voice cutting through the gunfire. "I am here!" she screamed, waving from behind the crates. Luca turned toward her voice. Their eyes met across the kill zone, a moment of pure connection in the midst of hell. A shot rang out from the catwalk. Ava cried out, spinning around as a bullet grazed her upper arm, tearing through her sleeve and leaving a line of fire across her skin. Luca saw her stumble. The control he had maintained shattered. He let out a sound that was less human and more animal, a roar of pure fury. He turned his weapon on the sniper above, firing rapidly until the man fell from the railing. But more blades were pouring in from the back offices. Ava pressed her back against the crate. Clutching her bleeding arm, she looked down. The young guard who had been playing on his phone lay unconscious near her feet, knocked out by the initial blast. His gun lay on the floor. Ava reached out and grabbed the heavy pistol. Her hands were shaking, but she remembered the lesson Luca had given her in the safe house. 2 hands, stance, breathe, squeeze, do not pull. She peeked around the crate. 3 men were pinned down behind a forklift, firing at Luca and Marcus, keeping them from advancing. Above the men, a massive steam pipe ran along the wall, hissing from a stray bullet hole. Ava raised the gun. She didn't aim for the men. She aimed for the pipe. Breathe. She squeezed the trigger. The gun kicked hard, jarring her shoulder, but the bullet hit true. The pipe burst. A massive jet of scalding white steam exploded downward, engulfing the three men. They screamed, dropping their weapons and scrambling blindly away from the heat, their vision completely obscured. "Move up!" Marcus shouted. Luca's team surged forward, securing the floor. In the center of the room, Victor Hale was backing away, his eyes wild. He spotted Ava behind the crates. Desperation twisted his face. He lunged for her, intending to grab her, to use her body as a shield one last time. Ava saw him coming. She didn't run. As he reached for her, she stepped inside his guard, just like she had seen Luca do in training sparring. She twisted her body and drove her elbow backward, slamming it into Victor's solar plexus with every ounce of strength she possessed. Victor gagged, doubling over. The wind knocked out of him. Before he could recover, a dark shape slammed into him. Luca was there. He tackled Victor to the ground, the force of the impact cracking the concrete. Luca didn't use his gun. He used his hands. He disarmed Victor with a sickening crack of a wrist, tossing the weapon aside. He punched Victor once, twice, 3 times. Brutal, efficient blows that left the gang leader dazed and bloody. Luca raised his fist for a final, lethal strike. His breathing was ragged, his eyes black with the urge to end the threat permanently. "Luca!" Ava shouted, stepping forward. "Don't!" Luca froze, his fist hovering inches from Victor's ruined face. He looked up at Ava. She was bleeding, bruised, and covered in dust, but her eyes were clear. "He's done," Ava said, her voice steady. "Let the police have him. Do not make yourself a murderer for him. He's not worth it." Luca stared at her. Slowly, the murderous haze receded. He looked down at Victor, who was wheezing through a broken nose. "You are right," Luca whispered. He stood up. Straightening his jacket, he looked at Marcus. "Tie him up. The police are 3 minutes out. Leave the evidence of the embezzlement and the extortion on his chest." He turned to Ava. He closed the distance between them in a heartbeat. He didn't care about the blood, or the grime, or the pain. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck, holding her so tight she thought her ribs might crack again. "I got you," he choked out, his voice broken. "I got you." Outside on the docks, the night air was cold and clean. In the distance, the wail of police sirens grew louder, a chorus of red and blue lights painting the sky. Luca led Ava to the edge of the water, away from his men, away from the violence. He sat her down on the bumper of his car and knelt in front of her. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped a smear of blood from her cheek. His hands, usually so steady, were trembling. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw. "I'm so sorry. Ava, I dragged you into this. I made you a target. I almost got you killed." He looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "I thought I could protect you by pushing you away, but I just left you alone in the dark. I will never forgive myself for that." Ava reached out and took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "You came for me," she said softly. "You risked everything to come for me. I would burn the world for you," Luca admitted, the truth of it stark and terrifying. "But I can't ask you to stay in the ashes. You should go. Ava, take your family. I will give you money, new identities. Go somewhere safe, somewhere I can't hurt you." "Is that what you want?" Ava asked. "You want me to leave?" "I want you to live," Luca said, his voice cracking. "And I cannot imagine a life without you now. But I love you too much to keep you in a cage." Ava smiled. A small, tired, beautiful thing. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I made a choice, Luca," she whispered. "Back in the nightclub, when I stood up to Victor, and back in the penthouse, when I decided to help you, I chose to stay. I chose to care." She brushed her thumb over his cheekbone. "I am done living life alone. Luca, I am done being the girl who handles everything by herself. I want to handle it with you." Luca let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "Are you sure?" he asked. "There is no going back." "I know," Ava said. "I am not going anywhere." She closed the gap between them. The kiss was not frantic, nor was it rough. It was slow. It was grounding. It tasted of sweat and tears and copper. But underneath it all, it tasted of promise. It was the seal on a pact made in blood and survival. As the police cars screeched into the lot behind them, Luca broke the kiss. He stood up, pulling Ava with him. He wrapped his arm around her, shielding her from the flashing lights. "Let's go home," he said. Epilogue. 6 months later, the apartment was filled with the golden light of the late afternoon sun. It was not the sterile, cold penthouse, nor was it the cramped apartment in the north side. It was a renovated loft overlooking the bay, with wide windows that let the ocean breeze drift through. Ava sat at the kitchen island, a tablet open in front of her. She was no longer wearing a waitress uniform. She wore a soft cream sweater and jeans. The screen displayed the quarterly earnings for Voss Security Solutions, a legitimate consulting firm that specialized in high-end corporate protection. The transition had been hard. There had been lawyers, plea deals, and a dismantling of the old syndicate operations that had taken months. But the North Side blades were gone. Victor was serving 20 years, and the streets of Graycrest were quieter. Ava heard the front door open. "I am home," Luca's voice called out. He walked into the kitchen. He looked different. The weight that had always sat on his shoulders seemed lighter. He was still dangerous. That edge would never truly leave him, but the darkness had receded. He walked up behind Ava, wrapping his arms around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, looking at the screen. "Are we making money?" he asked, his voice a low rumble against her back. "We are breaking even." Ava smiled, leaning back into him, which, for a legal business in its first year, is a miracle. Luca chuckled. He turned her chair around so she was facing him. He stepped between her knees, his hands resting on the counter on either side of her, boxing her in, not to trap her, but to hold her close. He leaned down and kissed the sensitive spot on the side of her neck, making Ava hum with contentment. His lips moved to her ear. "My mother called," Ava said, running her hands up his chest. "She wants to know if you're coming for Sunday dinner. She's making lasagna. I wouldn't miss it," Luca said. "Diego still owes me a rematch on the PlayStation." He pulled back to look at her. The sunlight caught the gray in his eyes, turning them to silver. He looked at her with a reverence that still took her breath away. "You know," Luca whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "I still think about that night." "Which night?" Ava asked. "The night at the Velvet Trap," Luca said. "When you walked into that back room, you looked so small and so fierce." He smiled, a genuine, warm expression that reached his eyes. "They asked you if you came alone," Luca recalled softly, "and they mocked you for it." Ava laced her fingers with his, squeezing his hand tight. She looked at the ring on her finger, and then up at the man who had walked through fire to stand beside her. "I did walk in alone," Ava answered, her voice steady and full of love. "But I will never walk alone again." Luca kissed her, the sun setting behind them, casting long shadows that stretched out together, intertwined and inseparable. Across the floor of their home, "Thank you so much for listening to You Came Alone, They Mocked. I hope you enjoyed Ava and Luca's journey from danger to redemption. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment down below and say hello. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button for Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss a new episode. And please, share your thoughts on the ending in the comments in English. I read every single one. See you in the next story.